Okay, so I thought I would start this off by doing a little bit of a science experiment. So what I want to know is how quickly does alcohol metabolize? Okay? Or perhaps more accurately, you're going to find out how quickly I metabolize alcohol. Okay? So let's give it a go. Bear with me on this one, okay? I'm not a cheap date, I'll tell you that much. Shall we really go crazy? I've only got 15 minutes, so we need to make this worthwhile. Okay. So, 500 milliliters of wine. Okay, 2 large glasses of wine. It's already having an effect. Start to think about these questions. How likely now are you to employ me? See me do that. How likely am I to employ me? How likely are you to allow me to drive a school bus? Or to stand in an operating theatre and operate on your nearest and dearest? Or to teach your children? Or to lead your organisation? Just reflect on that for a second. I'll come back to it. What I'm going to do in the next couple of minutes is give you one very simple solution. One thing that every single one of you can do tonight. Every single one of you can easily do. It's entirely within your control. It will not cost you a single penny. You will not need to work harder. And in fact, if you do it, you will not need to exert any effort at all. But if every single one of us does this every day in the UK for 1 year, we will save the UK £38 billion a year. Okay? What is that one thing? I will guarantee that if the whole of the UK does this one thing every day for a year, the saving to the UK will be nearly 2% of the GDP. If we include the US, Canada, Japan, and Germany into that, it is £680 billion. What is it? Tell me, what is it? Okay, it's very simple. All I need you to do is to sleep. That one simple thing. Not sleep forever, just sleep for 7 hours a night. If every single working adult in the UK slept for 7 to 9 hours a night, every night for 1 year, it would save the UK economy £34 billion a year. Let's put that in some context. War on Want say that in order to get 62 countries up to the Millennium Development Goals, it would cost $45 billion. Tick, done, in 1 year. In the UK, the debt for the NHS is, depending on what you read, 2 to 3 billion. Could save that 15 times over in 1 year. And all we have to do is sleep for 7 to 9 hours a night. Maybe these goals are too aspirational. Maybe thinking about figures in billions is too difficult. So let's take it down to the individual level. Let's take it down to what it means to a person. So meet John. John works for you. John is part of your team. John is a lovely, lovely guy. He's professional, he delivers, you care about him, you want him as part of your team. But over the last few months, something's not been quite right with John. He's not really been hitting his targets. He's been a little bit late. He's been a bit poor in his decision making. He's perhaps taken a few risky business decisions and he's not on his game. He's not performing. And John takes you to one side one day and he says, I really need to talk to you about something that's going on for me. I've been struggling with this for a while, but I now feel able to talk to you about it because not only is it affecting me personally now, I realise it's affecting my ability to do the job. And you're a caring, sharing boss, and you sit down and you listen to John. And John tells you he's got a problem with alcohol. He's been drinking, and he's been trying to manage it, and it's now affecting his ability to do the job. What do you do in that instant? In that moment that John shares and discloses that information, what do you do? Well, the chances are, because you're super warm, caring, compassionate people, you make sure that John feels heard. You make sure he's got a support network at work. You check that he's got support at home. You might refer him on to a specialist organisation such as Alcoholics Anonymous, the Samaritans. You might refer him on to an internal system that you have, such as an employee assistance or a counselling scheme. But ultimately, you won't let John leave your office until you feel he's safe, secure, that he feels part of the organisation, and there is an action plan to help him change his behaviour, if that's what he wants to do. Now imagine John comes into the office, and his behaviour is exactly the same. He's making risky decisions. He's late at work. He's argumentative with colleagues. He's a little bit hostile. He's finding it difficult making decisions. He's not really there. He's finding it difficult to be present. He's moody. Exactly the same kinds of things. But instead of saying he has a problem with alcohol, John says, I'm tired. Exactly the same outcome, exactly the same behaviour. This time, you probably say, so am I, John. Join the club. Yeah, we're all tired around here, guys. We have to do more with less. That's just the way it is these days. Welcome to the heady heights of leadership. That's just the way we have to behave. Not that supportive. Probably thinking, yeah, I feel exactly the same, John. You wouldn't refer him on to some organisations. You wouldn't check his network. You'd probably just pat him on the back, say, you're doing a great job, keep doing it, off you go. But why would we do that if the outcome is exactly the same? It's just that the cause is different. You'll be very glad to know that this was blackcurrant juice. Okay? Because I'm a highly trained professional and I wouldn't dream of drinking alcohol on the job. But the point is, if we are encouraging organisations to work people longer and longer and longer, we are basically encouraging people to behave as though they had drunk 2 glasses of wine. The effect on their behaviour can be equivalent to drinking 2 glasses of wine. Think about how uncomfortable you were feeling when you thought that was alcohol. When I was here talking to you and actually drinking alcohol. The thought of me actually operating on your nearest and dearest or driving a school bus or leading your organisation having drunk 2 glasses of alcohol. So why would we encourage that kind of behaviour in organisations by encouraging lack of sleep, by working longer and longer and longer and longer hours? And don't think that this is just a leadership issue. So the research that we did here at Ashridge is we now know that being a leader does not have to mean that you get poor sleep. But equally, poor sleep is just not the remit of leaders. This isn't something that is just about leadership. This isn't just about teaching leaders to look after themselves. This is across the entire organisation. The research that we did found that even very junior people in organisations, people with no line management responsibility, were not sleeping enough. That it was showing up for them in a whole range of behaviours, physically, psychologically, socially, emotionally, and cognitively. People were reporting things like it was making them feel stressed and pressured. They were more hostile at work. They felt less able to communicate effectively with their peers. They felt less likely to go into meetings. It was making them physically unwell. In fact, we know from the research that chronic lack of sleep increases your rate of cardiovascular disease, of stroke, of type 2 diabetes, and some cancers in a really quite significantly and profound way. In fact, the World Health Organization now classifies shift work, where your circadian rhythms change, it is now classified as a carcinogenic. Shift work as a carcinogenic. This doesn't get any more serious. If £34 billion doesn't scare you, then think of it at the personal level. If you still need convincing, think about this. An hour to an hour and a half less sleep a night than you need, and let's be honest, we all probably operating on about an hour and a half less than we need most nights. That equates the next day. So straight away, the very next day, can reduce your level of awareness by 32%. I thought it was worth writing that on the slide because for those of you operating on a sleep debt, you won't be able to remember the figures, so I thought I'd better reinforce it for you. You are 32% less alert the next day. So what's the business case here? If you have 3 people working for you, and each of them have an hour and a half less sleep a night than they need, you are paying for one person to be asleep all day. Not particularly effective, is it? If you have 30 people working for you, then you're paying for 10 people to be asleep all day. So if you don't care about them as an individual, think about the business case. So what does this actually mean? What can we actually do about it? Well, obviously the answer is to sleep more. But it's about thinking about the individual, it's about thinking about the organisation, and it's about thinking about the economy as a whole. And it's actually really simple, because if we start to think about the cost to the individual, physical health, psychological health, emotional health, and then it starts to show up in the organisation. So we know that poor sleep lends itself to cyberloafing, unethical behaviour, hostility with colleagues, supervisor abuse. So this is at that organisational level. And then when we get to the UK, we're talking about £34 billion saved if we take this seriously. So what do? Let's take a step back. In the manufacturing industry, there's now a huge amount of emphasis on something called predictive maintenance. It's really simple. If you run a factory, you run a production line, you want to know when your machine breaks down. Because if you know when your machine is going to break down, you can intervene before it breaks down. And you save hundreds of thousands of pounds. A huge amount of disruptive innovation is going on predictive maintenance in these kinds of production lines, because the ability to solve the problem before it becomes an issue and before your production line breaks down can not only save hundreds of thousands of pounds, but it means you can choose when you look after your machine. It is just more effective in the manufacturing industry. We know from our research, we know from all of the research around sleep, how important it is for well-being, how important it is for health, how important it is for the economy as a whole. We know what we need to do. So if we are thinking about predictive maintenance in the manufacturing industry, then surely what we need to think about with our own well-being is the simple answer: to save £38 billion a year, we need to think of ourselves in the same way as a machine. We know what we need to look after ourselves. We know what we need to do to stop ourselves breaking down. We need to treat ourselves with some predictive maintenance. Thank you very much.